Well, Minister of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, Toko Didiza, says that the government is addressing the sensitive subject of national communal land tenure. The Inter-Ministerial Committee on Land Reform is hosting a two-day summit on the issue in Boksburg, east of Johannesburg. Constance Mogale, the National Coordinator for the Alliance for Rural Democracy and a member of the Land Access Movement, was concerned that the engagement took place without the Energy Ministry, which she says is a problem since mining companies and the government often ignore customary ownership rights. She joins us now. We are going to try and establish communication with Constance in a moment. She is, of course, going to be talking to us about that summit as it enters its last day today. A lot of discussions have been coming out there after the Deputy President, David Mabuza, in fact, addressed delegates who were in attendance yesterday. A huge issue coming out of it, of course, being the issue around land reform and land restitution. But, of course, an ongoing issue is, whether or not local government is working closely with traditional leaders and traditional chiefs when it comes to communal land and ensuring that South Africans in those areas are properly taken care of. Well, we have Constance with us now. Constance, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. Perhaps just outline for us what were some of the points that you felt were in fact missing from a lot of the discussions that came out of the summit.
What I felt is missing is that customary tenure rights are still not discussed. The government is intending to give 13% of the land to traditional leaders or title deeds of residential areas in the communal land to people living under traditional leaders, and the broader and outer boundaries of the land will be given to traditional leaders. So what I felt is missing is that, do we know that the paper we are referring to, because all we got was a concept note, we don't have a bill, we don't have any document to refer to, but also do we know who is in the communal land, who are we giving out the inner boundaries to, because the rural areas are overcrowded already. They also overlapping rights because people have arrived on top of other people. So the key panel on the Presidential Advisory Committee recommended the Land Records Bill, and so the government should be concentrating on trying to make the communal tenure law that is going to protect the rights of rural people who find themselves their land being open access where everybody can just come. Mines comes and open business, any foreign business, anybody from outside. So how about we concentrate on recording who's doing what on the land, who's living what, who arrived when. We do some kind of a recorder system which will make sure that when tenure security is offered to people, then they know who they are offering tenure security to. Not just giving a broader title to one person who might be a traditional leader, a CPA chairperson, or my uncle. Not looking at the inter-household dynamics around ownership and rights. So I think that the missing link is still there. The government is just, we're going for the vote, so they're just coming out with another sweeping moment to appease traditional leaders, thinking that maybe they will gun for votes. Yeah. So that is what we think.
Well,
yeah.
Constance, take us through the reality on the ground faced by a lot of South Africans who are in these situations. What are the rights, the tenure rights that are owed to a number of these people? What do those rights look like, and what sort of infringements are currently taking place in view of some of the issues that you've raised already?
So after the 2004 Communal Land Rights Act was struck down the road, government relaxed. They failed to enact Section 25, subsection 6, which says that people who were previously discriminated to own land, there must be legislation to make sure that those people's rights are not are not entrenched on. But there was this act which was interim, which was done by Parliament in 1996, called Interim Protection of Land Rights Act. So through this act, although it is interim, it has been the only weapon that rural people living under customary land has been able to use to protect themselves. For example, the Maledu judgment, the Baleni judgment, which ruled that any mining rights holder and land rights holder, they are equal. So you cannot come into the land and say, I have applied for mining rights, therefore I'm going to start to mine here so you can move. Because what has been happening, to answer your question, is that people are being dispossessed of their land again. Apartheid laws are being brought back. Apartheid laws that was informed by the Black Administration Act, like the Traditional and Customary Leadership Act, which was signed by the President on 2020, which gives traditional leaders powers to enter into deals with any foreign company without prior consultation and consent. But IPILRA says any development that happens in the land should be, the developer must seek prior informed consent. So free, prior, and informed consent. And there must be agreements written down as to what the rights holder will benefit and what the mining rights holder will benefit. And that is very clear, explicitly clear, stated by the Constitutional Court on the Maledu case. But that has not been happening. The mining companies around Bapong and the Platinum Belt as a whole, Limpopo, you find mine blasts during school hours. In Maditogwa, for example. You find trucks, big trucks, coming with a speed into the village that was a very calm village where kids can just play free. Now, right now, we've got a case where the truck hit the child. So the traditional leaders were supposed to be our first line of defense in terms of infringement of our rights. But now they are being co-opted. They get salaries. They are also members of parliament. They are part of these things. So we don't know who is our first line of defense when we feel like our customary land rights that we inherited over generations are under attack, and now they are legislating it through several laws. The reason why Communal Land Rights Act was struck down is one of them. Now there's this traditional and cohesion leadership. And as civil society was saying, we don't want the repetition of the Bantu stance where homelands were created to segregate black people from each other and black people from the rest of the country. And we are saying in 1994 we voted for a democratic government that is going to give us an alternative vision to land ownership, to one country and equality. So there has been buzzwords around just transitions, around radical economic transformation, around so many just share. And we don't know whether these buzzwords mean the same thing that we want. We want security of tenure for every citizen living in the countryside.
Right. Well, there's a specific ministry that has been set up to deal with the security of tenure rights. Yet, in your criticism, Constance, you mentioned the fact that the energy minister is missing from a lot of these conversations. Why have you singled out the energy minister? I'd imagine it has to be connected to a lot of the mining companies and the infringements by mining companies that you've already listed in and around some of these, communities. But what exactly could the energy minister do or do differently when it comes to issues around communal land?
So we were excited around the combination of several ministries, and one of them was the Ministry of Department of Minerals and Energy and Land Affairs, because every time we know that the Department of Rural Development and Land Affairs is the custodian of the land, the state land, and including the communal land. And every time when there's an infringement by the mining companies, they will always say it is the DMR who issues mining licenses and prospecting rights. And we were excited that now they are beginning to work together to make sure that they can work together to protect the rights of people who are living in the villages. So we expect them to, because our democratic government started by introducing the Mining and Petroleum Development Act in 2002, which was separating water rights, mining rights, and the surface rights. And that is the one biggest move that undermined the trust that we had in our democratic government, because some of the titles from the old order rights and the apartheid, the title deeds were not separating those issues. So it was like explicit that if you are a land rights holder, you own underneath and in the surface, and therefore if you want mining rights, you can. There's no way that mining can happen without the agreement of the surface right, but they separated it and they nationalized the minerals. So what we want them to do is to amend the Mining and Petroleum Development Act and to make sure that communal land rights, customary land rights are recognized as property rights. Because Mozambique does that. In their report in the Land Summit, one of it was that they went for exchange trips to look at what Botswana does, what Kenya does, what Tanzania does. But Mozambique recognizes customary rights as property rights, and even the banks. And no, issuing title deeds is not a guarantee of security of tenure. We have seen in Zimbabwe where the fast track land reform program, the president decided we're going to take the land and redistribute. And those people had the title deed, but it never materialized, it never protected them. So it is the political will that we need from all the departments, the political will that says we promised you an alternative vision of one South Africa, one nation, and this is how we're going to deliver it. We want them to give us a plan of how they're going to do that, and they are not giving us anything.
Well, you've outlined for us the role that the Energy Minister can play in terms of the Petroleum Act and the possible changes that could be made there. But what about this troubled role that the traditional leaders are playing? Does that require an overhaul of the system in its entirety, where we have a group of leaders who are in essence, as you mentioned, being co-opted, being allowed to be used to exploit some of these communities? Is there a system where traditional leaders no longer act as the middleman? And how do we sort of move or transition to that system? Does it require a complete overhaul of how things are done right now as they stand?
So the battle lines are drawn. And when I talk about traditional leaders, I think it should be an experience of their own constituencies to choose and say, we opt for traditional leadership, and we have confidence in our traditional authority. But it cannot come as a national law, because the acts from the Traditional Leadership and Governance Framework Act of 2000 and as amended, and the Traditional Courts Bill, which I call the Apartheid Bantustan Bills, and now the Traditional Leadership and Khoisan Bill. The person who's entitled to appoint or withdraw the traditional leader is the president, a political appointee that has a time frame of 5 to 10 years. And the president, what we have seen is that traditional leaders that are recognized by the people have been withdrawn. Their membership have been drawn, have not been recognized, and they will only recognize traditional leaders who are former trade unions or who agree to be their puppets, as according to the way Verwoerd wanted traditional leaders under the Black Authorities Act, the act that was denied by Albert Luthuli, Nelson Mandela, Bomakana. So they still want to use that apartheid law to recognize traditional leaders. You know, we had a hope under Ingonyama Trust, because they got the land after 19 in the eve of the democracy. But what they did, making people sign lease in the land of their ancestors, was bad. So we don't have hope in traditional leadership, and we are staying under the democracy. we need to now start looking at what is the role of traditional leaders in the democratic era, where people go for votes for their councillors and their political reps, and even in the churches opt for their leaders in the churches. Why can't we use a system where people have a say? People can say, we want this system of governance or the other, without being imposed of traditional leaders who Nhlapo Commission was never able to unbundle those conflicting without the traditional institutions.
Right. Well, Constance, you've given us a lot to think about for sure. That's Constance Mogale, the National Coordinator for the Alliance for Rural Democracy and a member of the Land Access Movement of South Africa, talking to us there about the Land Communal Summit. Up